During most of 1996 and 1997, WCW Monday Nitro had been destroying WWF Monday Night Raw in the television ratings. Thanks to WCW's aggressive nature of securing former WWF talent, their willingness to show exciting international stars in the mid-card, and of course the NWO storyline, WCW Nitro became more popular than the WWF's Monday Night Raw show, something that once seemed like an impossible task. Because of the runaway success of Nitro, Ted Turner wanted more WCW wrestling on his network. He wanted another show that, in theory, would attract all those Nitro viewers while also putting more pressure on WCW's main competition, the World Wrestling Federation. Eric Bischoff, WCW's executive producer, did not want to create another TV show for television. Eric felt that he was being pushed to the limits with Nitro, and adding another TV show would not only add an incredible workload to his already busy schedule, but a second TV show would also dilute what he was producing on Monday nights. Overexposure was also a problem too. Eric argues that there's only so much wrestling people can stomach on a weekly basis, and putting on a second show wouldn't only hurt WCW Nitro, but it would hurt WCW as a whole. There's also the fact that Ted Turner would not be giving Eric a budget to create this show. All production costs had to come out of WCW's own revenue streams, and to pay for this, Eric decided to increase house shows to fund the broadcasting of this new weekly television show. You can instantly tell why Eric thought this was all a bad idea, but the show had to go on. In late 1997, it was agreed that this new show would get taped on Tuesday nights and the show would air on Thursdays, another departure from Eric's philosophy regarding live TV being the best way to produce wrestling shows. But still, another live weekly show would have probably drove Eric insane at this point. That being said, some episodes of WCW Thunder were live. So the show was born, and the first episode aired on January 8th, 1998. The whole show's creation, as you can probably tell, put an incredible amount of strain on WCW and Eric Bischoff. People tend to think that WWF Smackdown was created almost instantly to compete with Thunder, but no, it took well over a year for the WWF's own Thursday night wrestling show to make it to television screens. By the time the WWF were ready to put on their secondary TV show, the company was defeating Nitro in the ratings, and the World Wrestling Federation felt that WCW Thunder would now be an easy target. At the very beginning of 1998, this may not have been the case, but fast forward over a year later, and yeah, the WWF could easily take viewership away here. The very first WWF Smackdown aired in April of 1999. It was a pilot episode that was presented as a special one-off show, but in reality, the WWF and network UPN were testing the waters here. A smart move when you consider that the WWF could attract advertisers with proven numbers when the time came to put Smackdown into a weekly time slot. Keep in mind too that UPN was on network television, not cable, marking the first time the WWF went on network TV since the last Saturday night's main event that aired 7 years earlier. UPN, at the time, was also keen to get its own weekly WWF show. The broadcast television network had been slipping in the rankings and they wanted to attract that lucrative young male demographic. The WWF was doing extraordinary numbers with Raw on the USA network, so UPN wanted the pilot episode of Smackdown to succeed just as much as the WWF did. In producing Smackdown, the WWF were already at an advantage over Thunder because the WWF didn't have to expand house shows or anything like that. Sure, producing another weekly TV show would add pressure, but at the same time, the WWF were masters at television production at this time, something they are still very, very good in. Whereas WCW Thunder was a problem for Eric Bischoff, WWF Smackdown was an opportunity for Vince McMahon. And having the right mindset here would make all the difference when we, as viewers, watched the final product. Honestly, watch the first episode of WCW Thunder. I wanted to make a video about that episode, but after watching it again, there was absolutely nothing I could say. The whole show, which ran for 3 hours, was absolutely stuffed with time-wasting segments. It's astounding that the live audience sat there for so long with all the WCW Nitro clips that were shown on the big screens. Compare this to the pilot episode of Smackdown, which felt like it had an incredible amount of urgency and energy to it, and what you end up with is two separate broadcasts that show a real contrast in where the companies were during their respective debuts. Now, to be fair, Smackdown did debut over a year after Thunder, but consider where both companies were in 1998 and 1999. WCW had more viewers than the WWF when Thunder made its debut, and the WWF had better viewership numbers when Smackdown made its debut a year later, so I don't think it's totally unfair to judge both shows against each other from a production standpoint anyway. So let's get to it. We know a bit about the circumstances surrounding the debut of WWF Smackdown. Let's take a look at the pilot episode, the first ever Smackdown episode that actually turned 21 years of age yesterday. This show aired on the 29th of April 1999. Smackdown was live from New Haven, Connecticut. The show opened up with that classic old Smackdown music, but the footage used during the intro was different to what we would see when the show went weekly later in August. You'll also notice that the setup here looks exactly like the WWF Raw broadcasts from back in 1999. Smackdown did not have its trademark blue ring ropes or the oval-shaped Titantron just yet. The first segment featured Vince McMahon and Stephanie McMahon coming to the ring to talk about the Ministry of Darkness and their attempt at forcing a marriage between Stephanie and The Undertaker. They were interrupted by the Corporation, and a main event match was set up that evening that featured the Corporation's Triple H teaming up with the Ministry's Undertaker to take on Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock. A blistering start here for SmackDown. They set up a main event that wrestling fans wanted to see here, a star-studded tag team match that featured bitter rivals and unlikely partners. Chances are you'd want to stick around for this SmackDown main event after seeing the opening segment, but keep in mind that this whole thing took around 15 minutes. We still didn't have a match yet. So what we'll do here for fun is also check out what WCW Thunder put on this same evening, and we can check segment for segment and match for match. Within the first 15 minutes of WCW Thunder on this evening, we saw Ric Flair in a mental hospital and we had a match, Curt Hennig versus Booker T for the WCW title. The Flair stuff is a bit painful to watch, to be honest. His recent actions as WCW president and his lack of giving a damn led him to this mental facility, spurred on by Roddy Piper, who was gunning for Flair's on-screen presidential role. Hennig versus Booker T wasn't bad, but it wasn't great either, to be honest. It had a poor DQ finish, and Booker T remained the TV champion after the bell. Back to SmackDown, and we have our first match, Val Venis versus the Blue Blazer. Owen Hart was trying to fool everyone by saying he was not the Blue Blazer, but the fans in attendance and the fans at home knew it was Owen. Deborah and Jeff Jarrett were at ringside for this match, and the fans in New Haven were chanting for Deborah's puppies more so than the action in the ring. The Blue Blazer got the win after Deborah distracted the referee and Jeff Jarrett interfered. To be honest, it's not a landmark first broadcast match that the WWF probably wants to talk about too much, for obvious reasons of course. Nicole Bass came to the ring afterwards and chased Val Venis away. Nicole was smitten with the big Val Boski, but Val Venis wanted none of it. And then the Godfather's music played. Out walked Charles Wright with his ladies, and because Godfather had previously defeated Jeff Jarrett, Deborah was supposed to go and work for the Godfather. Jeff Jarrett and Owen Hart made quick work of the Godfather, and the segment ended. Yeah, this wasn't great, to be honest. When we got back from commercials, the Blue Blazer had an interview segment where he told us to take our vitamins, say our prayers and drink our milk. Immediately following this, we had Test versus The Big Show. Test had just left the Corporation and the WWF were going to try and turn him babyface, so it's weird that The Big Show would squash him here in around a minute. The Bossman came down to attack Test, and Big Show would chase the Bossman away to end the segment. If I'm honest here, these very first two ever SmackDown matches, I feel they were pretty poor. So let's go over and check in with WCW Thunder just to see what they were doing around this time. Keep in mind, I'm not directly comparing the two from a ratings or exposure point of view. SmackDown would be available in many more homes than what Thunder would be, and the WWF was just so popular at this time that it's hard to imagine Thunder ever getting better, no matter what they put on their show here, but it's still fun to jump back and forth just to see what was going on. After the Booker T vs Kurt Hennig match, we would have 3 different promo segments. The first featured the ever elegant Sandman, known here as Hack, asking his girlfriend Chastity to pick his opponent for the evening. It was decided that Hack would face Kevin Nash later in the evening in a hardcore match. We then saw Booker T and Rick Steiner beating each other up backstage. These two were getting ready for their match at Slamboree. After a hype video for Bill Goldberg, he tried his best here to promote the Bagwell vs Steiner match that was happening also at Slamboree, while imitating who he called Big Papa Dump. But yeah, this hasn't aged very well. I wanted this segment to end quickly and with mercy. WCW Thunder started its next 30 minutes then with a match pitting Jerry Flynn against Stevie Ray. At the 30-minute mark on Smackdown, not including commercials here by the way, The Rock was making his way down to the ring to talk about the tag team main event, where the Great One would team up with Steve Austin to take on Triple H and The Undertaker. Tensions were already high between Austin and Rock, and things would get worse for the babyface tag team when the corporate ministry was formed in this very same segment. I already talked about all this in my last corporate ministry video, and I don't want to drag it on. But what you should take away here is that the WWF are willing to make huge story-altering changes on this pilot episode of Smackdown. They were making Smackdown feel like a show you couldn't miss. If fans weren't watching here and their friends phoned to say Triple H and The Undertaker are now in the same faction, chances are they would turn the TV over just to see what was going on. Take away your personal feelings about the corporate ministry here and just take note of the ballsy move. This segment here could have drew a huge rating for Raw, but the WWF put it on network television. So far, with watching Thunder and Smackdown side by side here, the WWF is totally killing it when it comes to story and promos. The wrestling though, on both shows, hasn't been much to write about. Kane and X-Pac had a backstage interview next. The tag team champions had been having some issues as of late, thanks to Kane snapping at X-Pac a few times, but their match with the New Age Outlaws would be a little later on the show. Draws then came out with Prince Albert for his match with D'Lo. Ivory was in D'Lo's corner. A decent match here, and watching this back made me remember how good and how underrated D'Lo was. Draws didn't get much of a chance to show what he was capable of, thanks to Prince Albert being his main point of offense, and the match unfortunately ended in a DQ win for D'Lo after Albert interfered. Draws and Albert were about to give D'Lo a piercing, but Mark Henry came to the ring to save the day. The audience enjoyed seeing Sexual Chocolate return here. He got a good pop. Immediately afterwards, the New Age Outlaws had a backstage interview, and things weren't going so smoothly for the Road Dogg and Billy Gunn here. Billy got upset when Road Dogg said X-Pac was still his friend, even though the Outlaws were going after X-Pac and Kane's WWF tag titles. The Tag Team Championship match was up next, and all 4 men had an excellent showing here. It's funny too, I was reading over the comments from the New Age Outlaws videos I uploaded, and there was a lot of toxic stuff there getting posted by viewers in regards to the Outlaws. Some of it was maybe justified, but there is absolutely no denying that they got audiences on their feet. Add in the fact that this was before X-Pac created his very own X-Pac Heat, and you have a match here that is leagues above everything else we have seen so far when comparing both of these Thursday night shows. And it's funny because the 3 degenerates in this match now seem to get a ton of hate online. Anyway, Billy Gunn was all business during this match. He was anxious to win, whereas the Road Dogg was a little apprehensive about wrestling X-Pac. But the match went on. It was fast paced where it needed to be. Kane was there to keep things grounded and hard hitting, and the tag team champions retained when Road Dogg accidentally hit Billy Gunn, allowing X-Pac to score a pinfall win. So we're now around 2/3 into Smackdown, and so far it's been good. The tag team match saved the in-ring action. The storyline featuring the corporate ministry, The Rock and Steve Austin has had a great deal of hype, and while the opening matches could maybe have been better, so far it's been quite good to go back and watch. Switching over to WCW then, we have 2 matches and an in-ring promo to get through. WCW would now start presenting some big names, a little uncharacteristic for WCW Thunder in early to mid 1999, so let's see if they could do better when it came to story progression and in-ring action. The Kevin Nash vs Hack match sounds like an absolute train wreck on paper, to be fair, but it's a hardcore match. It isn't supposed to be Steamboat vs Savage, so let's see what they can do. Hack got the ladders and tables set up as Kevin Nash made his way to the ring. The opening minutes of the match was all Kevin Nash. I began to wonder if Nash would take any bumps on the ladders or tables at all, but to his credit, he did eventually. He actually took a few weapon shots during the match. Do you ever see hardcore matches where it feels like the competitors are just going through the motions, using one weapon, then moving on to the next, then moving on to the next, and then there's no real story and there's no real method to the madness? That's exactly Kevin Nash vs Hack on WCW Thunder, April 29th, 1999. Yes, I know it's a hardcore match and the whole point of the match is to hit one another with weapons, but just because it's hardcore wrestling doesn't mean there can't be a story in there too. But yeah, it's Kevin Nash vs Hack here on Thunder. I'm getting ahead of myself. I shouldn't have expected much, really. Nash wins. The powerbomb through the table to end the match was the only move to get an audience reaction. Mean Gene Okerlund interviews Bam Bam Bigelow next. Bam Bam was going up against Brian Knobbs at Slamboree, so I'm not sure why WCW decided to have Bam Bam Bigelow challenge World Champion Diamond Dallas Page to a world title match to main event this episode of Thunder. I love Bam Bam Bigelow, but are we supposed to believe this guy going up against Brian Knobbs soon on pay-per-view would win the WCW Championship? The next match then was Goldberg vs Meng. We could all hope Meng would go insane and shoot on Goldberg, but it didn't happen. Goldberg scores a win in a very Goldberg match. Smackdown has been a better show by far, and we still haven't even got to the main event. I'm just going to wrap up the Thunder show now then. DDP accepted Bam Bam's challenge via an interview with Gene Okerlund. Randy Savage defeated The Disciple in a match that went nearly 10 minutes. That's 8 minutes too long for a Disciple match. And Bam Bam Bigelow was defeated in the main event against Diamond Dallas Page in another hardcore match. Again, to give credit to Thunder, the Page vs Bigelow match was decent, but extremely predictable. The main event match was the best thing about the show. I ended up being way more entertained than what I was anticipating. It's just a shame we knew who was going to win. So let's look at the final 45 minutes or so of Smackdown, and to show you how jam-packed these old WWF shows used to be, the WWF managed to squeeze 9 different segments and spots into around 45 minutes here, and that includes 3 matches. We see Road Dogg and Badass Billy Gunn having an argument over their tag team match earlier. Officials have to break up the pair as Badass Billy Gunn blames the Road Dogg on their loss, and Billy Gunn wasn't wrong either, by the way. Handsome Doc Hendricks introduces us to the Brood inside the ring. Remember, these guys just left the ministry, and we are going to hear from Edge, Christian and Gangrel for the very first time here. Their first promo together in the ring, and it was comically bad. Hard to put into words here, but it had to be nerves. Gangrel kicks things off and he seems so shaken and anxious that it becomes difficult to watch. This vampire, this eerie character who drinks blood, red liquid, on his way to the ring, and here he is being extremely awkward on the mic, stumbling over his words and nervously laughing between each line. I wish I could show you it here, but obviously I can't. Go and check it out yourself and get ready to feel extremely bad for these 3 guys. It was a flop of epic proportions here. Again, I put it down to nerves. Edge salvaged things a little, but not by much. The segment ended with mercy. Doc Hendricks got a bloodbath, and Gangrel wouldn't have any microphones placed in front of him in the near future. After seeing Billy Gunn storming around backstage looking for X-Pac, Kevin Kelly interviews Ken Shamrock, who has a street fight coming up with Bradshaw. Standard Ken Shamrock stuff here, nothing notable. The street fight is next. Shamrock attacks during Bradshaw's entrance and the two go at it. The contrast here between this match and the Nash vs Sandman match on Thunder is striking, thanks to Bradshaw and Shamrock having just a touch more heat. Bradshaw attacked Shamrock the week prior with a baseball bat, so these two were able to tell a story during their street fight that was all about the baseball bat. Just a simple thing like that can make a world of difference, and it really did here. Shamrock got the win by choking out Bradshaw with the bat. They didn't go through any motions here, it was short, but it was an entertaining mid-card match. Mankind is interviewed in the boiler room. He is scheduled to take on the Big Boss Man. He cuts a great promo here where he introduces himself to UPN audiences, saying he hangs out in boiler rooms because he enjoys the ambiance. He wears a mask because it sells action figures. He wears a shirt and tie because it looks pretty darn good. And he has a sock that will go down the throat of the Boss Man because fans think it's funny. We see a clip of the corporate ministry backstage. Shane McMahon is patting himself on the back for creating such a dominating faction, and now it's time for Mankind versus Boss Man. It's very short, it's only about a minute and a half. Test came down to help Mankind when Boss Man tried to run away. Big Show made an appearance to also make sure Boss Man stayed in the ring. Mankind locked in the mandible claw and it's over. These three men, along with Ken Shamrock, would go on to form the Union stable, of course. Just before we see The Rock and Austin walking towards the entranceway, Billy Gunn finds X-Pac. He got a few punches in, but Kane broke up the fight. It's now time for the very first Smackdown main event. This one really set the bar for future Smackdown main events. 4 of the biggest WWF superstars in history, 4 very diverse personalities, coming together for a landmark main event here. I'll just say this too, if popularity is judged by audience pops during entrances, Stone Cold was easily the most popular guy here. The crowd went nuts when the glass smashed in the arena, but as you know, this was and still is a natural reaction to Stone Cold Steve Austin. The guy was just super over here in 1999. A good, fast-paced match here that had a lot of intrigue, thanks to the corporate ministry formation, and also thanks to The Rock and Austin being forced to team up. It also goes to highlight the real lack of superstars in today's wrestling. I mean, proper, legit superstars. Can you make 2 tag teams with today's rosters that has as much legit star power as this match here? Unfortunately, we never got a clear winner. The corporate ministry came down to cause a DQ finish. The Union cleared out the ministry. Vince McMahon came out to stop Shane helping the corporate ministry, which led to Vince McMahon getting a chair shot. The audience rumbled in anticipation as Austin began getting to his feet. Stone Cold hit stunners on The Undertaker and Shane McMahon, and we go off the air. The first Smackdown is in the bag. I always recommend going back and making up your own mind on things like this. There's a chance you may enjoy Thunder more than Smackdown here, and I really do mean that. People enjoy different things in wrestling. Some fans were die-hard WCW supporters, some were not. In my opinion though, Smackdown was better than Thunder here by a mile. There were some hiccups during the first half hour of the show, but from the tag title match onwards, the pilot episode of Smackdown was very entertaining throughout. All things considered, Thunder still managed a 3.5 TV rating, whereas Smackdown grabbed a 5.8. A clear win for the WWF as expected. Remember, it was on network TV after all. But Thunder's number here is a number that the WWE would kill for nowadays. It goes to show just how popular wrestling was as a whole back then. Smackdown would become a weekly UPN show then in August of 1999, 4 months after this pilot episode, and WCW Thunder would end up moving to Wednesday nights in January of 2000. There was no competing with the WWF's new television show here. That ballsy move by Eric Bischoff to go head to head with Raw seemed so far and away by this point. Smackdown still airs today, of course, and while the quality may have taken a dip in recent years, these first lot of episodes from 1999 are still great to go back and rewatch. Anyway, thanks for checking out this video, I hope you enjoyed it, and take care.